Transmigration. Hi, Patricia. After our chat yesterday, I feel compelled to add a few things which I hope will prove to be beneficial to current events playing out between you and Tom. When you shared the fact that Tom was communicating telepathically with a woman at your past life regression retreat, I wasn't surprised or startled at all. Truthfully, it served as explicit evidence of something I long surmised about Tom. The nonverbal signs were always there with Tom, and for me to better elaborate on them, a digression, which perhaps is bad form, is the only way for me to come around to it. I always have a hard time coming to the point in a timely manner when discussing such matters. It's a delicate, sensitive subject, and the last thing I want to come across as being is presumptuous, or extending myself in ways that far exceed what I know, or even misrepresenting my observations as facts, when indeed all they are is an observation. So in a roundabout way, to preface what follows, in the interest of being as thorough as possible, here it goes. My best friend is a 70-year-old Jewish beatnik poet who lives in Portland, Oregon. His name is Don, and we met on a park bench in downtown Portland 5 years ago. I remember the scene. A group of kids were walking along the sidewalk using the F word like it was going out of style, and by means of an introduction, I looked at Don and said something to the effect of, "I beg your fucking pardon, but you wouldn't fucking mind if I fucking share this fucking park bench with you on this beautiful fucking day, would you?" I used the most mockingly obsequious voice I could muster, and he obliged. An icebreaker of sorts. In no time we were discussing our mutual admiration of Charles Dickens and Jack Kerouac, and here 5 years later we are still going strong with, for what I know to be mutual, is a life-affirming, life-sustaining correspondence. Our love of metaphysics, and just what on earth is metaphysics? To most people, to the human circus at large, it's an idle, meaningless endeavor. A load of bull feathers, to borrow a phrase Don has introduced me to. I like how bull feathers rolls off the tongue. It's more pleasant to the ear than bullshit, so it has that going for it too. So why are we here? What are we? Where did we come from, and where are we going? Just about every person has asked those questions by the time they are 5 years old, in some form or another. But somehow, through a combination of organized religion, browbeating it into people's heads, that all the mysteries in the universe are patently held in the ironclad interpretations of the Holy Scriptures by the church, mosque, synagogue, ashram, or whatever the case may be. Combined with the daily attrition of what it takes to stay afloat in the frenzied modern world, the timeless, most essential questions have been relegated to the fringes. There's this unspoken message floating in the ether that these timeless questions have either long been answered by religion or are irrelevant to living in the modern world. Only the most naive and cluelessly unhip members of the herd indulge in such fanciful games when there are so few dollars to be made off of asking them. That is, if you're clever enough to capitalize off them in some way. My whole life I've found this unspoken notion to be insufferably smug and the source of quite too much suffering in the world. It's the arrogance that follows these assumptions, that these ultimate questions are either laughable in the 21st century or irrelevant. I am hardly a humble man, make no mistake about that. But there is a measure of humility that comes from asking these questions, and that measure is more than ample at times. It is also a wellspring of civilizing humanity, for it's hard to work up too much furious indignation in an ideology, any ideology, especially the flimsy ones, when you live with the knowledge never too far from the periphery of your mind that absolute conviction in anything beyond life itself and the cherishing of this life may be just beyond the reach of the manifesting world. Taking into account the 4% of the known universe and the laws that govern it, per Neil deGrasse Tyson's expertise, which I respect. I saw him here in Seattle. He's as funny as he is brilliant. So anyway, back to it. Metaphysics, theology, philosophy, the best of literature, the movie Easy Rider, past life regression therapy, and the discoveries made therein. Certainly the book you are writing. One of the things they all have in common is the subjects and questions they ask reach beyond the manifesting world. They present themselves in the manifesting world, but their full reality exists and can only be fully known and appreciated beyond the manifesting world. Humans since the beginning of time have been aware of this most elusive of truths. The Bible is the prime example of the primitive human, with the science and technology available at that time, attempting to understand and express the infinite. For example, just considering the last half of Exodus and the first half of Leviticus, the descriptive language used in the passages covering the construction of the Ark of the Covenant, followed by the enumerating of all the types of sin offerings, it's like the Israelites were performing brain surgery. The attention to detail in the language is that sophisticated and exquisite. The exactitude of the measurements of the Ark of the Covenant, where to sprinkle the blood and how much blood should be sprinkled where and when, and what to do with the gallbladder 3 days later. The colors and fabrics of the priest's robes are written in such detail as to ascertain how many stitches went into sewing the robes. Sure, they were savages at war with every neighboring tribe, but the human genius to perceive that there is more than meets the eye is evident on every page of the Bible. It is a metaphysical text and can only be truly appreciated as such. All of this brings me back to what I saw in Tom when I was a teenager 20 years ago and first met the both of you. That farm was a magical place. What struck me so much about the property was the combination of romantic and classical sensibilities. Functionality with artistic flourishes abounding. You could see it looking at and around the barn, the horse stables, the house, the outside and inside furnishings of it, then down by the pond. You could see it was the work of someone who worked with his hands, was physically active, probably built most of the property himself or had a hand in all of it. And with the artist's touch, it wasn't the work of someone who built his property solely with an eye to functionality. Everything about it had the touch of an artist. From the gazebo to the pebbled walkway to the tool shed with his workbench, to the placement of the trees. Which trees were chosen to be cut down decades ago, which were allowed to stay, and which were chosen to be newly added and why. And that's not even mentioning the garden. The garden alone, and the nurturing that goes into the harvesting of such a garden. Everything about the property had an aesthetic value to it without sacrificing its functionality. And I found that incredibly striking, unusual in the best way possible. I knew there must be some kind of dynamic going on between the two of you to achieve such an equilibrium. I didn't see it as being necessary for me to understand all the details of your marriage, but a few observations might be of value at this point. I don't remember when the subject of past life regression was first raised. I only remember you first asking a friend of yours who was teaching at the high school if she could recommend a student to help explain how Windows worked. Windows was only a few years old at the time. Windows 95 was a revolution in how people interact with computers, and then Windows 98 improved slightly on Windows 95. Hence our meeting. It was clear to me right away that you were much more verbal than your husband. You quickly filled me in on some of your background, undergrad at Albright, a practicing psychologist working on a book. Tom didn't say much, but then again I was a 17-year-old high school kid helping his wife with the rudiments of these newfangled things called personal computers. Aside from a few pleasantries, there wasn't much of an occasion for more. But then as time went by and the three of us struck up a friendship, the differences in personality types became clearer. A lot of it was generational. I was in my early 20s, you were a younger baby boomer, and Tom was of the generation which kind of straddled the wars between the end of World War II and Korea, but before Vietnam. So there was always a generational thing where each of us came of age in different times with different sensibilities in this country. More specifically, and to better understand how Tom could telepathically communicate today in his present incapacitated state with a woman at your past life regression retreat, I'd like to focus more on my observations of Tom over the years. The easiest famous person to compare Tom to, even though it's not particularly accurate, but as a personality type, I think it could be, is Robert De Niro. When you watch Robert De Niro in any movie, you see all the talent on screen with very few words. He doesn't have to say much, but you can't take your eyes off him. And I'm not referring to the physical histrionics in the gangster movies. I'm talking about all the subtle nods, looks, and gestures with which he can communicate 1,000 words in a single screenshot. Tom reminds me of that. He always had that presence about him. People like you, me, and my friend Don loved words. and love using words when making our attempts at unraveling the mysteries of existence. It goes on, there's no end to it, but nevertheless, it's an edifying experience. Feeling like we understand the universe a little bit better by lassoing the right turns of phrases. And we do. It's a jolly enterprise through which I found endless fulfillment, and I'm sure you do too. But it's not necessary to understanding. Words in abundance are not necessary, and I found Tom to be living proof of that. There was always a knowing intelligence to Tom's bearing. What he built there on that farm, what he knew, and the extraordinary talent to accomplish it with his hands. His marriage to a literary woman, a woman of extraordinary talents in her own right, but a distinctly different set of talents. Tom knew that, and Tom knew and knows you, Patricia. That's why he loves you and married you. I remember countless moments where with a wink and a smile and a brief phrase, Tom made it clear. It was written all over him. It wasn't in any scholarly form to be published in a journal, but he knew, and on some level, his spirit still knows, even at an advancing stage of dementia. More to the point of the present day, Tom's communicating via the woman at the retreat. To my mind, it serves two purposes. One, Tom's life's work in his present incarnation, as it's approaching the end, isn't finished yet. I wouldn't dare begin to venture an opinion on what that might be. In Tom's current state of dementia, how much of his life's purpose still to be accomplished that will be a conscious act is probably nil. But the pulse of his spirit, as D.H. Lawrence would say, what cuts to the quick of his essence, still has work to do. The mystery of mysteries, if I do dare venture, is to connect, atom to atom, molecule to molecule, cell to cell, personality to personality, and that spirit is still connecting. What majesty! The second purpose, if I may so dare, is directly personal to your life and its testimony, Patricia. People have souls, and their souls are not restricted to inhabit one corporal body for the entire expanse of time. I know that, you know that, Tom knows that, Shirley MacLaine knows that, and a whole host of others. Why the transmigration of souls is still a controversial topic in this country, who the hell knows? Nevertheless, Tom's revealing of his full name and details from his life shared with you on the farm through the consciousness of a total stranger highlights a couple of things. One, it's conspicuous evidence that Tom's been operating at a higher consciousness for quite some time. You don't fall off the turnip truck with that ability. And two, trust what you know. Trust what you've learned through a lifetime of examining your experiences. That wisdom is true. It doesn't need to be proven in a petri dish. We may never have the full picture in human form, but we have enough to trust in to guide us through our lives. Let your internal compass guide you. Tom will be okay. I can only imagine what you're going through as he and your mother both approach the other side. You have my sympathy. But it will be all right. So in parting, please trust what you know. You've worked way too hard in acquiring it not to. June 2018.